once the revenue clock starts is really when the board starts playing a little bit more of a fiduciary responsibility. And if you're taking a VP of sales job, a head of sales job at a startup, I guarantee you, you will be board facing. You will be in every board meeting, and you will be talking about not just the number and did we hit it, but you will be talking about the go-to-market strategy, the playbook, the metrics of that drive the predictability of not just, what did we do this quarter, but what are we going to do next quarter and the quarter after.
Startups can be a lot of fun, but when you start taking in outside capital, the pressure goes up to be able to take your company to the next level. That's pressure on the founders, that's pressure on the team, and pressure on you as the revenue leader. Today, we're going to talk to 5 professional investors and get their perspectives on revenue leadership. My name is Ryan Williams. I'm the CEO of Reachable and an executive coach, and this show is called Perspectives.
I think when all you basically do is fund experiments, it's less scary. And it's actually easier than if you have a bucket of cash that's for like things that you know are working and a bucket of cash for funding experiments.
That's Charles Hudson. He runs Precursor Ventures, and he's a seed stage investor. Now, later on, that term seed stage is going to be really important if you haven't heard it before. But for right now, just zone in right on how he's talking about his startup portfolio. Everything is an experiment.
If you have 2 strategies, there's always tension between, well, where should I put the marginal dollar? Should I put it into a high risk, potentially high reward experimental company, or should I park this dollar with a company that's already working? And so we try to simplify our life by saying we're mostly in the experiments business. Like, we want to do that.
For most revenue leaders, the thing that really kind of marks taking their career to the next level is when they start to get exposure to professional investors. You've just met 2 of my favorite early stage investors, Jocelyn Goldfein and Charles Hudson. Both of these investors will take an early bet on a small company, hoping that it becomes the next rocket ship. These investors are not just cheerleaders. They're also people with fiduciary responsibility, meaning they have a legal responsibility to the other investors to make sure the company is doing well. That's not just supervising the CEO. That's not just forming the board. It's also supervising revenue. That's a big piece of it. Today, you're going to meet 5 investors that bet on companies from $0 in revenue to over 100 million. It's a wide range, but these investors represent a lot of perspectives, and they invest out of a pool of over $10 billion. So to get started, let's jump in and talk to Max and Mary.
It has to be fun. I want to work with people that want to work with me. I want to work with people that I can build a long-term relationship with, and it's got to be fun. I think also then, like, you need to suss out if a person's full of shit or not. So are they being straight with you with, real answers, or are they giving you kind of shaky answers for no reason?
A cloud company, which is basically all I invest in, will spend 50% of its total revenue dollars on sales and marketing. So being able to articulate the reasons why incremental dollars will generate incremental ARR is the bet that generally you're taking at the growth stage.
One of the main challenges for the revenue leaders I work with as an executive coach is the presence and confidence to interface with executives, other executives, and professional investors. Oftentimes this means presenting to the board, and boards and investors can be really intimidating. And for me, when I was a revenue leader at a Series A, Series B startup, I found that the advice that we're going to get here in a minute from Jocelyn Goldfein is advice that I wish I had 10 years ago.
I think that's every VP of sales' sort of first instinct is to if the board is being demanding or if the board is disappointed, let me win back their confidence. Let me project confidence. But if the reality is that you're not going to be able to make the number because only 1 in 10 customers wants to buy it because frankly, it doesn't have enough functionality, or it lags the competition, or the POCs are failing, then it actually is quite harmful to the company and to the board to obscure that reality.
You shouldn't think of an investor as a boss. Investor is just someone who is truly invested in your success. And so one of the things that I like to think about is like, how can I best help my companies? And if that's the way I can do it, then that's what I want to do.
And so I think first and foremost, it's people over everything. Like, is that person, do you believe this person's going to figure it out? And especially when you do like really early stage stuff, the idea itself is going to change so much and the product is going to evolve. And so it's really about the person.
Sometimes I find that executives at the company are reticent to ask for help from the board. And especially as venture capitalists, we do have huge networks, whether it's within our portfolio or externally. So one thing that I love to tell the VP sales in companies that I work with is like, please make asks of me. If you need help on pricing and packaging, if you need help on thinking through kind of go-to-market motions, or even help with customer introductions.
So the round we do, it's kind of find product market fit. That next seed round might be a round that's really about begin to scale the team. Begin to put other leadership in place, whether it's sales or marketing or ops or finance, whatever the business needs. But oftentimes it's founder-led sales still, for the most part. And if the founder's not doing all of the selling, they're probably still the single most effective salesperson in the company.
This brings up a really interesting point. Even though the investors that I talk to all want to be great resources for their companies and their revenue leaders that they're taking these bets on, they also have a responsibility to make sure the metrics get hit.
So the bottom line is we are looking for growth, and the growth can't be flat and it can't be a little bit of growth. It's got to be some kind of growth that looks like an angle over here.
And this begs the question, if investors know what they need out of the companies that they're evaluating and making bets on, do you know what you need from the company as well? Knowing that a company is right for you is doing a process called due diligence, where you're going to dig in and learn a little bit more about how they're doing today, where they're going in the future. This process of due diligence, by the way, is what our professional investors do every day before they make an investment. So naturally, they'd be the right ones to ask.
The things I've seen the best sales leaders that we've hired do, one is the good ones usually try to find, show me / tell me the one person in here who's selling today. Let me meet the person who's selling today. And they get in front of that person and they'll grill them like, how are you getting in front of these customers? Because there's a lot of ways I've seen companies have false signal. One of the big ones is all of the early customers just happen to be friends of the founder. They're not arm's length.
We've looked at some companies where I've known the space pretty well. And I'm just like, wow, like historically, there's been no budget for this. Like, why is that going to change? And where's that budget going to come from? And then I've looked at other companies where it's like, yeah, if they buy this software, they don't need these 10 headcount.
If you're taking an exec job at a startup, you are an investor. Do your due diligence like one. And unlike other employees at startups, sales leaders have this superpower of, they're equipped to sell and they have the network, the Rolodex to call to try to sell to. So you're leaving your superpower on the sidelines if you don't do this.
If you don't have a network and you have nobody to stress test this against, then, it's a little bit of your own research. It's like, what else is out there? I like to understand the competitive landscape. And a lot of times people have this in their deck, but it'll be like one of those kind of like quadrant matrices or whatnot. They'll either have a matrix or quadrant, but and sometimes you'll see these decks and it's just their logo on the top right thing. And then all these others like, okay, nobody overlaps at all. Nobody does this. So you want to make sure you're getting a truthful and transparent answer. Great thing is you can go out to like G2 or Trust Radius or Capterra, some of these other review sites, and see what else is living out there. But understanding the competitive landscape and how they differentiate the competitive landscape.
I would just try to get your hands on the CS person to figure out like, hey, are people actually using this? Does this thing work? Or are you in here behind the scenes manually tuning and setting things up for people? Figure out like how well the product is working. And I think some combination usually of like customer success and like if there's a ticketing system, there are usually ways to figure out like how well does the product deliver on its value prop? And is that like is it performing well there? And then I would also try to figure out how much the company knows about its own selling environment.
All right, quick check-in. We now know a lot more than we did even just a few minutes ago, and we're only about halfway through this episode. Investors, they're doing experiments too. That's important for us to know as leaders, that the people we're interfacing with, they're taking bets, and some of those bets are risky. And being professional in the board setting, a lot of times we want to think going to the board means that we need to have all the answers. But in actuality, the most professional thing you can do is not have all the answers, but help ask the right questions. Asking for help is something your investors want you to do. They've got big networks. They want to connect you with mentors, coaches, other successful revenue leaders too, because they know that is going to be the key, or at least one of the keys to your success working on the company that they've made an investment in. And the last thing is that working with professional investors might still be scary at first, but they really want you to succeed. They want the company to be successful, and they know that you're a big piece of that. You might be wondering, what is it that they're looking for in you in the hiring process? How do you get one of these, top jobs at, running revenue at a technology company? And beyond that, what experiences do you need today to ensure the next time you go for one of those interviews or meet the board or meet a professional investor, that you're bringing the experience that they want to see?
You can establish yourself as a successful player who can take a company from 1 to 10 million in sales or whatever it is, right? You are golden. You may not make as much as being, head of VP of sales at Facebook, but boy, you are going to be, you're going to have every founder bowing down to your idol, for a long time, because that's what founders really, really need.
I don't usually ask like a set of canned questions to an individual to try and suss them out to see if they're any good or not. It's a conversation that I have with somebody and see if we personally have chemistry. I think that's like another thing that I look at when I make investments.
So someone who is somewhat data driven, does understand how sales and marketing ops work, and then how to align on the executive level with the marketing leader as well, is something that I ask for a lot.
I like to ask about people's mistakes. I want to hear that they can be vulnerable, that they can introspect, that they can honestly admit they've made a mistake, because that little bit of humility, or rather too big an ego that keeps us from admitting we've made a mistake, also keeps us from getting help and accepting advice. I love hearing about how people handle conflict. I think you learn a lot about coachability. And so just sort of, what were the tough decisions in founding this startup? Like what are the tough decisions that you're facing right now?
I think great executives realize that sales is not only the pathway of strong revenue generation, but also product iteration. And being able to listen very closely and understanding customer pain points also really can feed into product development and maintaining a strong technical competitive moat. And I in addition to having strong sales and marketing alignment, I very much recommend strong sales and product alignment.
I don't think that there's many right answers when it comes to building revenue. But one thing that came up with every investor I've talked to is they're looking for somebody to bring in a playbook. But what they're looking for in the hiring process, what they're looking for at the board level, is someone who comes in and has some formed opinions about what to do at this stage.
Given the fact that you've got a product in the market of some kind, an MVP, and somebody's paying for it, can you actually make money doing this? Now, we're not looking for all these detailed kinds of things, because at this point, you're still bleeding, hemorrhaging money to try and get it out there. But can you make money? Do you have a business model that makes any kind of sense, so that if you actually can pull this off, do we think that, yeah, you will eventually get your costs down and your numbers up and so on and so forth, and there is a viable, rational approach to making money?
But a great sales leader generally tends to have a playbook that they've tuned and pattern matched across companies that they've been a part of, and that they think that they can put into practice given the situation of the company that they want to join.
I think that the biggest thing is you also need to not just run a playbook just to run the playbook. You need to come in, audit, ask questions, and know what to use from the playbook at the right time. And not just say, okay, well, we're just going to do this. I'm not going to ingest any other information or change, how I'm going to do things. I'm going to run the playbook that I know that works, because times change, businesses are different, buyers are different, you name it. There's a lot of things you need to adjust for.
when a new VP of sales shows up in the boardroom and the story changes from these are the customers we're talking to this is the structure. We did these things this quarter, and that's going to lead to predictive success next quarter and the quarter after that. As a board member, I feel such a great sense of comfort. I feel that we've made a great hire. I feel that we've started the engine that's going to drive the business. It helps me sleep at night.
Nearly everyone I talked to said that playbooks were important, but these are also the same investors that just a few minutes ago said you didn't need to know all the answers. As revenue leaders, our job is to do experiments, see what works, and scale. As investors, their job is also to do experiments, to take bets on the things that are working, to see what will work in the future. Both parties need to share some data, right? That's number two, is if our investors are good at taking big, data sets and making sense of patterns that they see, doing what they call pattern matching, then the more data that we share together, the faster that we can grow, the more likely it is that someone's going to give even more resources to step on the gas when it's time. And this last piece of advice, I wish I had years earlier, but the investors we're talking to all seem to recognize that there's an expertise by stage. There's a head of sales role in finding that first $1 million of recurring revenue. There's a VP of sales role. Maybe it's going from 1 to 5 or 5 to 10 or 15 mil. And there's another kind of set of capabilities where it goes, okay, how do you go from Series B, which might be a $10 to $15 million a year in recurring revenue, to be able to make the jump to go maybe 5 or 10 times that, right? How do you get from 10 to 15 to 50 to maybe 60 or 75 million? And then beyond that, maybe there's a picture of what a CRO looks like to get past that $100 million mark. Our investors all tend to have really specific pictures, but those of us that are leading revenue teams that have come from a sales background, it's really tempting to think about, I want to run the biggest team. And maybe that's because we came out of trying to win the biggest deal, because those are the deals that got talked about at all hands. But the truth is, each of these roles are different specialties. And that's something that I wish I knew years before. So we've talked about the role of the professional investor, and we talked about the board, and we talked about some of the pressure that's on the company to be successful as outside investment comes in. It seems like there's maybe one elephant left in the room to talk about, though. Revenue leader turnover, especially VP of sales titles, that's an 18, 24-month window, with most of the time that first time a VP of sales is turning over even quicker than that. A lot of it's not voluntary, which only makes sense that we would go back to our professional investors and ask for their opinion on what's happening, what causes it, and how to prevent it. Because it's not good for anybody. It's $1 million mistake to the startup. It hurts the revenue leadership ecosystem. And as we are about to find out, the investors, they don't like that either.
The kind of stage companies we're talking about, an early stage company that has not yet found product market fit, that has not yet found a repeatable process for sales and everything else. They are the first person coming in to try and create one. And so they will never be loved in that sense. They will never, the deck is so stacked against us that there is a reason that 75% of them, get canned in the first year, because it's an untenable position.
And, one of the big traps I see people end up in is an enterprise motion and an SMB or mid-market price point. And the number of times I've seen this happen at startups where they're like, we got a 50K deal. And I'm like, well, that rep at scale would need to do 10, 15 deals a year to pencil. And these are not quick turn deals. So we've got a problem here, because we've got to find a way to increase ACV on these deals, or we've got to change the way you sell this product, because like the model you have right now doesn't appear to be working.
Companies prefer to maintain their leadership. They would only go outside when it's clear that an individual leader can't scale with the business. So asking for help such that you, even as a leader, can scale with the business, I think is a huge benefit and something that a lot of companies are looking for.
If there's a product problem, investors and boards aren't very good at detecting that. Like, we're not using the product every day. We're not selling the product to anyone. Like, we can't, you can demo the product to us in the boardroom, but that doesn't make us expert in whether the product is good or bad. We don't know how hard it is to onboard. We don't know the workflow of the end user. And so we're not going to recognize that there's a product problem and haul engineering and PM over the coals. We're going to notice that sales are off. We're going to notice that you've missed your number. That's where product problems are going to manifest.
I also think there's something to be said about stage appropriate leadership. And, you know, the person who took you from 0 to 1 might not be the person who's going to take you from 1 to 10, who might not also be the person who's going to take you from 10 to 30, who might not also be the person who's going to take you from 30 to 100, who might not also be the person who's going to take you from 100 to 500. So like maybe the expectations are all wrong. Like maybe it's okay that the tenure in tech companies and startups is short, but instead of doing time-based vesting, maybe do milestone-based vesting. And there are people that I know that I've met over time, and I've met a lot of them running a media company for salespeople. There are people I've coached and said like, hey, you are great at 1 to 10. Keep doing 1 to 10. Go get 1% at 4 companies over the next, 8 years, and just do 1 to 10, 1 to 10, 1 to 10, and then hand the baton off to somebody who knows how to do 20 to 100 or whatever, 10 to 100. And that's great. You get the upside of their success where they know like it's their specialty and there's no ego that needs to be involved.
Wow. That was a lot. And that was a lot in a short amount of time. So thank you for sticking it out and being with me on this. I've only got one ask for you. And if you got some value here, then please share this video, text it to a buddy, drop it on Slack for your team, or send it, through your preferred network, wherever you share leadership advice with other leaders. I want people to see the perspective of these awesome investors. In fact, tag one of the investors or myself to keep the conversation going. Would very much like that. For now, though, we're going to wrap with a last little nugget of advice from Mary D'Onofrio, who regularly is making a bet on who's the next billion-dollar company.
If this were easy, every company would be a billion-dollar business. But it's iterative but exciting, and the people who love selling truly are special.